Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of College Football Pros. I am Nick, and he is Drew, and we're here to bring you the best and most exciting in all of college football. It's been a couple of weeks since we've been able to get together. Drew, you were down in Orlando, Florida, at Disney World?
I was in Orlando, Florida. I was scouting out the very talented prospects that are at Disney. So I think there's some really good potential coming out of there. No, but seriously, I was down at Disney with my family. It was a fantastic time. The Pro Bowl is right over there on the, they had the practices at the ESPN facility over there at Disney, so it was cool. Pretty sure I saw a couple guys walking around Disney, but they were with their families, so I didn't want to be that guy to run up to them and go, hey, can I have your picture? And your kid is like, crying because they see like Cinderella or something, so I'm going to do that. It was great, man. The weather was great. Now I'm back in Ohio where it's,
Ohio again?
Yeah, 2 inches of snow and like 12 degrees. So fantastic, man. How have you been?
It's been definitely been an interesting couple of days. I've been uploading old episodes to YouTube as best as I can. So we're I'd say about 20% done. So hopefully sometime in the summer we'll be finished getting all the content up, since I'm apparently living in a different generation and only have a small amount of bandwidth I'm allowed to upload and download on each month. That makes it really difficult. But other than that, things are going good. Really excited for the, college football things we have to talk about, the little bit of the draft stuff. I kind of want to start with the Senior Bowl, and it's an interesting week because it's one of those situations where honestly the practices mean way more to those involved in the games. In fact, most of the scouts and evaluators actually leave before the game starts. So it's interesting, and obviously we weren't there. Hopefully next year we will be in a position to gain media credentials to go down there and cover the Senior Bowl. But it was almost like a lot of what happened at the Senior Bowl was not reflective. What happened in the game was not reflective of what actually happened in the practices.
Yeah, I mean, again, like you said, these are glorified pro days or glorified, 7-on-7 drills with the skeleton drills and stuff like that for all these quarterbacks and for the skill position guys. Yeah, like you said, everybody leaves when the game comes because you're running your base offense, your base defense. You're really out there just to see, can guys make a throw under pressure, in a game type situation. It was fun to watch. I'm not gonna lie, there was obviously some people from Miami that I wanted to watch. I wanted to watch Josh Allen. I really thought, we can go in depth if you want, but I really think Josh Allen is the guy that went up everybody's draft board. He was the one guy everybody wanted to say who can do this, who can really take this opportunity and make it his own. And I think Josh Allen really did that. He really impressed.
We can start with Allen because in the article I wrote this week, he confirmed everything that I thought about him, and that he is going to be an absolutely... I know you're a big fan of him, so I'm not going where you think. I think he is going to be... He's more developmental than I think.
Sure.
Yeah, so what I saw in that game was essentially two-face. The first half, I don't think he looked good. He made a lot of throws on the move, back foot, overthrow, side throw.
I think that was scripted, too.
Some of this stuff just looked awkward, but the reason why it rubbed me the wrong way is it's everything I saw him do during the season that made me have a red flag. And truthfully, the whole time, all you hear the announcing crew talking about is, well, it's just going to be the first half for Josh Allen and Baker Mayfield, and that's going to be it. So I'm thinking to myself, this kid... legitimately, and again, evaluators aren't so much going off of the game, but from what I saw in the game, it took his draft stock, from my opinion, and took it from the middle of the first round and put him late first, early second, just because
you're saying Josh Allen's stock got hurt.
No, I'm saying if he would have only played the first half. But then they brought him out in the second half, and he was everything that I saw other people saying about I have a tendency to get negative real quick. I have a tendency to lock on to players and be like, okay, this is a thing that I saw that I don't like, and it unfortunately permeates into my vision on a lot of other things, and it makes it harder for me to see the good points, but you saw all those good points. So in my opinion, I think Josh Allen's probably played himself into a position where he's definitely a top half of the draft guy. In all actuality, he could, and I cannot stress could enough, he could end up being the top pick of the draft only because we already know that John Dorsey is attached to the kind of player he is, and if Dorsey thinks that that's the route, so like I put out a mock draft, and I'm gonna do my best to not rabbit trail too much, but I've had Saquon Barkley there pretty much the whole time. That doesn't mean Saquon Barkley is going to be there, okay? Or that doesn't mean that's what the Browns are going to do. The Browns, for all we know, may already have Barkley off of their board. They may not consider taking him even if he's there at 4. I think the argument can be made that they've got so many deficiencies in so many areas. Now the news comes out that Joe Thomas says this is it for Cleveland. I'm not signing another extension to play with this team. So now
he's going to retire as a Brown.
You think he will?
I think
he will probably try to latch on a shorter term deal with a potential contender after he plays this season with the Browns. But the moral of the story is now, that need can become more immediate, because we saw the Browns go from a team whose offensive line was pretty much awesome, gave the quarterback a ton. Was one of the best in the league, gave the quarterback a ton of time to throw. It's just that Kaiser didn't do well with the time that he had, but now that could put the Browns in a position where they may look at a guy like McGlinchey or Quentin Nelson and say, okay, we need to worry about this line. But I think ultimately there's very little probability that the Browns don't leave the 4th pick without a quarterback at one of those 2 spots. So if Josh Allen, to me, probably played himself into a top 4 pick. And, we'll just have to see how the pro days and stuff go. I think the evaluators agree that Saquon Barkley is over and above the best prospect across the board in this draft. That just does not mean that teams are going to sell the farm to get him.
Yeah, I don't think he's a guy that, like you said, he's not a guy that, say a team who's close, a team that's at the top half, of the first round, meaning later in the first round, so the bottom half, the top echelon of the teams, I don't think they're going to sell, say, like a Philadelphia Eagles, Atlanta Falcons. Say they didn't have, these star running backs. You're not going to go and say, hey, take my 5 best players for Saquon Barkley. You're not going to do that. They're not going to be in the mentality coming into this draft. However, like you said, he is far and above the best running back in this draft, and he is one of, if not the best player top to bottom in this draft. Let's talk about a couple other players real quick, quarterback-wise, because that's the sexy position. I think Mike White is a guy that I don't know how much more he can elevate himself, because it's the big 3 quarterbacks and everybody else. But I really think Mike White is the guy that if you sit him behind a really veteran quarterback like a Roethlisberger, Aaron Rodgers, something in that nature, you let him sit for 2, 3, even 4 years, depending on where he goes, I think Mike White is going to be a guy that we're going to hear from in the NFL for a long time.
Well, again, I'm never going to stop referencing the material that we're putting together at College Football Pros, and that you're exactly right. And that's pretty much how I worded it, and that's the team that I sent him to in the mid rounds, because I don't see it being very likely that he can, and I could be wrong, but I don't think he's going to squeak himself into the first round of the draft.
Not New Orleans.
New Orleans is a place. Yeah, I think with both of those teams, you're looking at situations, and that's where the difficulty becomes, because I don't think New Orleans is going to use a first-round pick. Baker Mayfield could end up being available at that point in the draft. I don't think he will be, but let's say he is. I don't know if New Orleans is going to say that's what we need to do with our first-round pick. So
not this year.
It could be a trade-up scenario where they have to use several of their others and maybe future picks. But to your point, I don't know if there was a more polished quarterback there. Like, when I saw Mike White, everything Josh Allen did was when he was in the second half. I can't stress that enough. All of that stuff looked to me like, man, this kid is someone who can be a really good quarterback in the NFL. When I saw Mike White, it wasn't like this kid could be good someday. It was like, why have and is it because he was at Western Kentucky? Is it because he was at a conference where it's not? Look, Western Kentucky for like 5 years, when it was Dowdy and Mike White, had been one of the more prolific offenses in all of college football. So do you get, as an evaluator during the year, where the blinders on and saying, well, it's just the system, this is what put Mike White in this position? But the kid looked like a real deal. He was a college quarterback who was throwing receivers open, and that's a lot of times what people have the problem with at that level.
Guys that he hasn't played with.
That's the biggest thing, yes.
Yeah, they were with these guys for a week, so it's not like you have, years of experience with your receivers, running backs, linemen, whatever. I mean, he was, like you said, he was having faith that those receivers are going to be where they need to be, when they need to be there, and he was throwing guys open. That's a perfect way to say that. And I really think that he's a guy, again, he's not a first top 5 pick, whatever, but I really like his future, and he's going to land at a spot, and he's going to be, I think, a good NFL quarterback.
I was partializing this situation in my head for the Pittsburgh Steelers, where they could use a first-round pick, and you can disagree with me, and I really don't think you're going to, because it doesn't look like Le'Veon Bell is going to be back.
No, I agree with you.
Man, you drop Sony Michel into that offense. Good night. That kid is so talented. He could easily be a late first-round pick. You're not expecting him to come in and put together what Bell did this year in his first year, but give him a couple. Connor's good too, but he's not as good. He's not as good as Michel. Is it?
No, I'm not.
Is it Sony Michael or Michel? I think
Michel.
Sony
Michel and Nick Chubb. Either one of those guys you can drop in that Pittsburgh backfield, and I think you don't. I don't want to say he won't miss a beat, because Le'Veon Bell is a really good running back.
Oh, yeah.
But, dude,
it's less intensified than it could be.
I mean, if you look at the stable of running backs, Mark Richt and now the current coaching staff have down there, they had Todd Gurley. They had Nick Chubb. They had Sony Michel. They had all these guys in the same backfield. Yep. Just fantastic. I mean, so say what you want about, well, they didn't win anything, whatever. I'll take any three. Obviously, we see what Todd Gurley has done in the NFL.
Yep.
Sony Michel and Nick Chubb can be just as good as Todd Gurley. They've proven it.
Oh, yeah.
Head-to-head, they've proven it.
Oh, they have.
I think that you're going to see 3 Georgia running backs, at the top of their game.
Yes. So
Absolutely.
The interesting thing, too, is my thought process went, man, Mike White, perfect. Drop him in, 3rd-round pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah.
Mike White. And you're looking at a kid learning behind Ben Roethlisberger that's going to have, okay, Antonio Brown might be a little bit older by then, by the time Ben retires. He said he wants to play 3 more years. Fine. You've got Martavis Bryant. You've got Juju Smith-Schuster. You've got more than enough there. You're going to have James Conner, who, if nothing else, he can be a change of pace back. But how many teams you see? Hello, did anybody watch football this year and see what not just Georgia in college football, but what the New Orleans Saints were able to do with 2 running backs who had enough of a difference of a skill set, but really the same skill set at the same time? Mark Ingram can catch passes. He's not as elusive. Mark Ingram can go through the tackles a little better, but man, that's the Pittsburgh Steelers can put themselves in a position where they could take the money that Bell would have commanded and go spend it on defense, because they're going to need the help. So, another guy, and I don't want to talk all about quarterbacks. Kyle Luletta looked good. He helped himself out. Rashad Penny, this kid is he's an interesting case, because I heard. And again, I wasn't there to see it, but a lot of the reports I heard is that he didn't have a good week of practice.
I read the same thing, that he was kind of up and down. He struggled on some of the schemes, but you know what, man? He's in that same echelon with the I almost said the Gurleys, but of the Michel and Chubbs and even the Darius Geises. I would put Michel and Chubb as like a 1 and 1A, and then I put Penny right behind those guys. This kid is explosive with the ball. If he can, figure out the pass ball blocking schemes, because he didn't have to do much of that, in college. So you go to the NFL, you're going to learn how to pick up the pass, the rush and call out stuff. So I think he's a special teams. He's a special teams, like just a firecracker. I mean, he can get out there and score and make plays. So I love this kid, and I think I hope somebody gives him a legit chance.
No, I'm right with you. I think that most of the concerns just come from the fact that he's small. He's on the smaller side, so he's not a guy that is. He probably can't do 25 carries a game at the NFL level. But there's a role for him. I definitely see him. I mean, it hasn't hurt guys like Darren Sproles. Christian McCaffrey looked like very comfortable in his role. I think he could carve something out in the game. Man, I think it was Kurt Benkert threw an on-the-run pass where he just showed. I mean, if he is not able to go to the next level and play, which it's going to be tough for him, but if he can help so many quarterbacks, because there are so many more prolific college quarterbacks who just don't have the football IQ that he had, but he like danced the line of scrimmage to the point where he looked like he was going to run over, and man, he just pulled back, didn't throw a Hail Mary back foot, this thing's getting intercepted pass, set his front foot and just darted Penny on the sideline, man. And that's when he went for that, 73-yard touchdown catch. I'm 95% sure that was Penny. It might have been Shark, but I think it was Penny. But Penny just looked really good. Again, his size is definitely going to be held against him. But speaking of DJ Shark, this confirms, again, in our article, that's going to be everything I say the rest of this podcast in the article. But in the article I wrote, when we talk about LSU, 2015, 2016, what was the number one thing we always said about LSU?
Quarterback play.
Oh my God, Brandon Harris was not a quarterback, unfortunately, for a lot of the receivers that went there, but DJ Chark is like the perfect example of that fact that team has been so plagued with quarterback play, because here he comes in and he just shows out. The kid had crisp routes, a strong presence, the ability to get open from defenders, the ability to create a lane for himself. I can't even, in his speed. There's just not enough that can really be said about how much he had to have helped his draft stock out.
Yeah, I mean, I think, he has top end speed. I think he's got to be one of the fastest guys on that field, when they played that game. But I question, just because of the unknown that he had at LSU with the quarterback play, does he, this is going to sound weird, but does he know how to play with a good quarterback?
I was getting ready to say the same thing.
I hate to say that, and you're right, dude. The kid showed that he can play. He had great routes. He's got good hands, and he's got top end speed. But man, it's a game changer, and possibly a bad way, when you go from having horrible quarterbacks that he did at LSU.
Oh yeah.
And then say he goes to the Packers with Aaron Rodgers, just for an example. Aaron Rodgers is going to throw you open, as we said before, and will he be able to know, hey, if I run 5 yards up the field, I'm going to be open. Aaron will give me the ball. Where at LSU, he goes, I have to become wide open.
Right.
So it's a difference. So I mean, yeah, I think he has a high future. I think he might be a special teams guy for the next couple years in the NFL. But I think he does have a legit chance. One more guy, and then we probably move on. But one more receiver is Alan Lazard. We've talked about him. If you go on our YouTube, College Football Pros, if you go to our website, collegefootballpros.com, we've talked about Alan Lazard numerous times. I think we can both agree that this kid, we want nothing for the best for this kid. We don't know him. We have no ties to him, but he's just been fun to watch at Iowa State. And he's a kid a slot receiver that'll go over the middle, that'll take the big hits, that'll block for you downfield. So I think he didn't have a great game, but he didn't have a bad game either.
Right.
So I think he was there, and I think he did what he needed to do.
Yeah, I agree with you. And he had a bad couple of practices. I know that people said that he dropped some wide open touchdown type things. And look, that was
a problem at Iowa State too.
Yeah,
he hadn't.
And he's another guy that, no necessary offense to the situation, but he doesn't have a ton of experience playing with good quarterbacks either. The quarterback play at Iowa State has not been great. It hasn't been bad with a couple of the guys, but I think he can be a red zone threat, and that's the problem. If you're a big play receiver and you miss a few catches, all right, it's kind of in the nature of what your role is. But when your role is to be the big guy in the red zone and you're dropping passes, now you're directly costing your team points, and it's a big problem. Did anybody flash defensively for you?
I mean, in a game like that, I feel like they're not, the defensive players aren't really
featured.
They're so hamstrung. I think they're only allowed to blitz like once every like 25 plays, or I don't honestly know, but it's random. But nobody really that really stood out. Like he made a difference. Practices, some kids, the kid from UTSA,
Marcus Davenport.
Thank you. I mean, I feel like he's everybody's standout player. So, but yeah,
he definitely was. To me, he was a guy that initially, when I saw him, I was just like, okay, this is against lesser competition. Put him against Georgia, or even better, for a lot of these defensive players from schools like that, my head says put him against Wisconsin. Put him against Iowa, where they're getting these offensive linemen who, when they're not in school, are plowing fields, and these are big country boys. But, and again, everything I heard is everything on the field is great. And he actually almost has like a backward problem of what most off-field issues are. But his off-field issues are just like insecurity and not knowing if he's going to be able to handle it. And that definitely is going to send a red flag to anybody who's potentially going to bring you to be a part of their team. On the field, you knew where he was. And again, that's like when a team makes a point to know where you're at, you've done something right as a defensive player. And even when they did what they had to do to take him out of the game, he was still there. He recovers the fumble because his nose is to the football, takes it in for a touchdown. Poona Ford, another guy who between the East-West Shrine Bowl and the Senior Bowl, I thought put together a really good set of tapes there. I don't think he got invited to the Combine, which was a little bit odd. I did think he did enough between those two games in the season to get there. He's someone to keep an eye on. And Shaquem Griffin, he was kind of the feel-good story of the week. He's the one-handed player. And I forget what school, it escapes me. UCF. It was UCF, yeah. So okay, I put in the article again, I'm going to say for the 410th time, but like, I think this is a good point of knowledge that everybody has to remember. Awesome that it's a great feel-good story and that he didn't let his limitation define him.
Yeah.
This is football, okay? Nobody's going to draft you unless you actually have the talent to be able to do it. And he showed that he has the ability to do it. I think that people get too hung up on the no-hand thing. I have two hands, so I mean, I'm lucky that I don't have to deal with that. I cannot imagine what it's like to have to deal with that. But if that was his only calling card, I would hope people understood if he didn't get, drafted or a chance, that's why it was more story than substance. But I do believe he's substance.
I think the kid deserves a chance. I mean, take the hand out of the question, take everything out of the question. The kid has shown on the field that he plays with two hands. I don't care if he has half a hand. That doesn't matter to me. Like, right. It's a completely different situation, but take the Michael Sam situation where he came out that he was openly gay. I don't care if you're gay. I don't care if you have one arm. If you can go out there and produce on the field, you're on my team. I don't care if you're, color, race, it doesn't matter to me. If you can play, you can play. Right. And I'll take this kid on my team any day of the week because he has the heart and he has the ability to come out there and help me win football games, and that's what's going to happen.
Yep. All right, so I think that pretty well covers the Senior Bowl. That's it. And I was talking to my wife. It's so crazy to think about the fact that we are sitting in a situation where we now have 7 more months until a college football game is going to be played. And it's borderline outrageous. Every other, the NFL, it's 6 months between, and if you really don't count the Senior Bowl and all that in the East-West Shrine, you're really looking like it's almost a 4-month season and then 8 months where it's, feast or famine for information. But
recruiting and stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm excited for the upcoming college football season. Again, we're kind of at the situation right now where it's slow news days. I know that is there anything recruiting wise that you
Christmas is Wednesday, which is National Signing Day.
Okay.
Which is going to be kind of anticlimactic because of the early signing period. A lot of guys have already declared, but there's still some bigger name guys out there that are deciding for big name schools. So Wednesday, I hopefully will do something, for recruiting. I'll have it up on the site. That's my goal. So probably Wednesday night. Check that out on collegefootballpros.com. So I think, there's some cool things coming down the line for us here at College Football Pros. So just stay tuned.
Yeah, we will hopefully have some fun stuff coming up that we kind of know about and are just being a little bit coy with how we're handling it right now. But yeah, I mean, the signing period, I will admit, so there's only so many hours a day, and there's only so many things that I can do, and I've kind of put myself out of the whole recruiting side of things because I just don't know enough about it, and it's so tough to kind of pick it up in the middle of it and follow along. So everybody here is going to be relying very heavily on Drew for the reports on that, but we'll touch on it as we go into the upcoming weeks. All right, let's move on for the time being. Let's talk a little bit about Ole Miss. It's a story that was weird to begin with. They lost bowl eligibility, I think, until 2020. Might be 2019. I'm not entirely sure. Now the reports are coming out that the ex-Ole Miss players say they were misled about the NCAA investigation. The players are Shea Patterson, Deontay Anderson, Jerrion Street, Jack DeFore, Trey Nixon, and Van Jefferson. They've all appealed for immediate eligibility for the upcoming season. Normally, when you're transferring schools, unless you are a graduate transfer, you have to sit out a year, not held against your eligibility, and then you are able to go and start for your school. So this is definitely very, very interesting. What is your thought on the whole case as it is and potential outcome?
It's interesting because, I remember when the whole Ole Miss stuff was going down, and it happened so quickly, over the couple months ago. And I went back and looked at some reports, and at first, all the reports were saying that because the NCAA bylaws say that if the reason you're losing eligibility and losing or transfer from your school is because of egregious violations of the former coach, you could transfer for free and not be penalized. So that was what was going out there. And now when you sent me this story, I was actually kind of confused. I'm like, wait, Shea Patterson's already eligible and everything, but the case is actually not, because the NCAA is saying that it wasn't egregious enough.
Right.
But I don't quite understand that. In my personal opinion, it should not matter if a coach is fired or if a coach quits or whatever. Anybody on that team or incoming recruits should be able to transfer for free, because the NCAA says, well, you commit to the school, not the coach. That's a load of BS. That's a bunch of crap. Nobody and their brother commits to the school. They commit to the coach. So with that being said, these kids are 1,000% in the right, and the NCAA had better do the right thing, because this is just another black eye on the NCAA, because you have the stuff going on with Michigan State and the gymnastic coach, and that's just bad. I mean, the fact that the NCAA knew about it and let it go on. So the NCAA, we both agree, are a joke, and they're a joke of a governing body.
Right.
And these kids, say what you want about on the field stuff, but they deserve to play, and they deserve to play right now.
No, I agree with you 100%. I think it's got to the point of ridiculous. The NCAA is ultimately the absolute worst, just the worst altogether. There's no question about it. They're going to ultimately lose this case to Christie.
They have to.
The gambling laws are on a country level basis are going to change. It's going to, at the very least, one other state's going to have it, but I think we're both in agreement that this is going to be a complete repeal, and it's going to become an enumerated power of the states to determine if their constituents will be allowed to play or allowed to do gambling. The interesting part is definitely going to be where the NCAA sits with things. You and I both know that they're definitely going to have a hair on their ass about this one. They're definitely going to be going after states at all the states at their levels to try to keep the amateur sports to be illegal. I think the smartest thing that states can possibly do is to literally just tell the NCAA to shove it, because ultimately, once you do that, if all the states said, forget it, we're going to collect all this, because isn't the NCAA the second most, college football specifically, the second highest bet sport in the country to the NFL?
Yeah, per dollar,
yeah.
dollars and cents and stuff. Yeah, football second.
Yeah, so, I mean, I don't see it being a situation where states are like, we really don't want that money. We'd rather just appease the NCAA. I don't think it's a situation. The NCAA, if they were halfway intelligent, should just go the route of the NBA and say, okay, you're going to give us 1% of the revenue that's earned. You make money. What are you guys, Roger Goodell? Like, I look at Roger Goodell as like an extension of the NCAA and the insanity of the perspective of which they come from. The integrity of the sport? Are you kidding me? How can a sport have integrity if we don't even know what a damn catch is? I as a football fan, my whole life cannot define a football. A catch in football is when you hold the ball. Well, wait a minute. It just depends if you're falling or not. Well, also it depends if you're headed out of bounds. If you hit the pylon too. Austin Seferian-Jenkins would have had like 18 touchdowns this year. I swear to God, this guy lost so many touchdowns into fumbles because of these antiquated, ridiculous rules that they have. If it's not a catch, it has to be a fumble. No, it can be an incomplete pass. That is another option. But, like, just the whole mentality with all of this and how the NCAA can use a situation like this to try to repair the damage that they've done, to put money back into programs, to perhaps give kids. I had a great idea. We talked about for years kids getting paid to play college sports. And you know what? I finally am on the side where I think they should. However, here's what should happen. If a kid gets paid to play sports, they should have to finish their degree. They shouldn't be able to exit out. They shouldn't be able to Royce Freeman in peace. I'm going to have everyone around me at the bowl game, but I'm actually out of here. I'm not going to stick around. I'm not going to play. There will be no more I'm sitting out the bowl game because of what happens in the future for me. It will absolutely have to be, look, now we're paying you. You don't get to decide these things. I know a lot of people might disagree with that because in the society we live in, everything has to be done either no strings or the way that you want it personally, but that's just not reality. So it'll be interesting. I hope for the sake of these kids that they're granted immediate eligibility, but
yeah, I mean, and we can talk just briefly about Shea Patterson in Michigan because I think he's the most high-profile guy to come out of this situation. And on the football side of things, if Shea Patterson is not eligible, Harbaugh and the University of Michigan has major problems.
Oh, yeah.
They got no quarterback. They put all their eggs in one basket with Shea Patterson. And if you're a Michigan fan, I'm sorry, but the season does not look good. Even if you do have Shea Patterson, there's a lot of questioning surrounding that team right now. So
yeah, I don't agree. I don't disagree with you whatsoever. That they're definitely in a tough spot, and they're in just like an impossible spot if they don't have Shea Patterson. I think that's going to be pretty much insurmountable odds is the best way that I would verbalize that. Okay, let's talk a little bit. This was another thing that I thought was a little bit shocking. Colby Listenby, former wide receiver for TCU, suing Gary Patterson, several university employees, and the university, accusing them that they forced him to try to play through injury. So he's suing for a pattern of abuse and harassment.
For over $1 million. Like I don't know legally. I'm not a lawyer. I just pretend to play one on TV. But I don't think. How do you sue your coach in school? Like they didn't like have a gun to your head saying you have to go out there and play. Like I guess I read it. I read this whole story multiple times, and I'm just confused. Like, okay, his doctors are saying that he'll never play in the NFL. Okay, that I understand, but you didn't have a Lloyd's of London, insurance policy that guarantees you all this money, and you didn't do so. You still willingly went out there and played.
Right.
I just, what are your thoughts? Because maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe I honestly just don't get it. I honestly am confused.
I I think that so there's probably a plus side and a negative side to this. In any case, there's three sides. There's your side, my side, and the truth.
Right.
So what catches my eye is he said that this is an injury that typically takes a minimum of 6 months of rest. Okay, now here's the problem with that. There are definitely, so if you get cancer, if you go to your doctor and your doctor says you're diagnosed with cancer, what is the next thing you're probably going to do?
Call my family?
Well, you're probably going to seek a second opinion just to make sure,
yeah.
because this is a life-changing situation here. You want to make sure. So what if you were told you had terminal cancer? The next doctor says, no, we think this is definitely something that you could get. So there's differences of opinion. So 6 months, I don't think you can definitely say, and again, I'm not a doctor, so I could be wrong, but I don't think that every doctor is just going to sit there and say, yes, 6 months, yes, 6 months, yes, 6 months. The problem is being cleared after 2 weeks while he was still in pain certainly seems to be a situation that it does seem rushed. So I do think we live in a society that is really quick to the trigger with lawsuits, because most people, quite frankly, will just pay to get it settled as to not have to deal with the bullshit that comes with it, right? I think that's the bottom line. So I don't know. We'll have to see. And it stinks because TCU is just coming off a really good year, and it had been a while. I mean, it had been since Trayvon Boykin was there, which has only been 2 or 3 years, but it was finally a feel-good year for TCU. I'm sure they had to be feeling strong going into 2018 with a Big 12 that's definitely losing some major contributors on several different teams. And now this is the type of thing because this could very well bust open, if it's true, this could very well bust open something that becomes much, much larger and puts the team in peril where it could lose scholarships and face a numerous amount of punishment. So
it'll cost a doctor his job.
It definitely could, yeah.
He'll lose his medical license for sure. I mean, if this is proven true that Gary Patterson forced him to go back out there, he might be, in jeopardy of losing his job. Look what happened to Mike Leach when he was at, trying to beat all those kids into, playing and all that bad stuff. So it's just a bad situation. And for everybody's sake, I hope it gets settled. And I hope it gets settled to where, honestly, I hope nobody has to admit any kind of guilt, because that would just ruin everybody's life. Or I think this is a situation where stuff happens, it sucks, but I think you just got to move on. I'm sorry to say it, but it's like, man. I mean, we're both big wrestling fans, and you go out there and the show must go on.
Right.
I mean, I do feel bad that the kid can't play in the NFL, but it's not like somebody had a gun to his head saying you have to play. I'm sorry. That's just and I could be wrong. Please. I could be wrong.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely not the greatest situation. I don't really want to wait. It's something I almost don't even want to talk too much about, because
right.
This kid thought he had a potential future in the NFL. Whether he did or not is really not on us to try to say. He feels
the best, whatever he does.
Yeah, he feels slighted that the coach and the coaching staff and all that put him in a position where he felt like he had to play. But again, if he didn't, I'm just the type of person who, why 3 years later? Why didn't you do something right then? I just always, I feel like these hindsight things are just never good for anyone, because if you're right, then your unwillingness to come forward with this has probably caused somebody else damage, because it's not something that they would likely just stop. It's something that they would probably have done in between that time, where they've rushed players who shouldn't have been. And all it takes is one tragedy to make something. This wasn't a tragedy, obviously, but you never know what could be. Someone could have a neck injury, and they force them out there, and they end up paralyzed. Then what? Then all of a sudden, this story that came out is a much bigger nut to crack. All right, SEC reports that they earned about $500 million in revenue last year. Just an absurd amount of money. I don't really know what to say about this. Again, like, I've just been thinking more and more. about paying players, and I get that they're getting a free education, but that's because they actually have a skill set that is uncommon. I think that's the biggest thing to keep in mind. Like, I didn't get a scholarship to I did get a couple scholarships to college, but I didn't get a full ride because my traits weren't overwhelmingly rare. Right? Theirs are. The amount of people who play collegiate sports is very rare. So the fact that they're going to earn the school money should not just pay for their education, but should also probably get them a little bit extra.
$40.9 million is what every school in the SEC will receive.
Yeah.
I don't honestly have any idea what to say about this because they're amateurs, right?
Right.
Schools, they're amateur athletes.
Yeah, well, that's Drew. That's the thing that the more it happens, it $40 million
is,
and if it's a situation where that is the exact cost to run everything, then okay, but I can't believe that it is.
I mean, if you pay, you got to pay for travel, you got to pay for hotels and everything. But, dude, $40 million, and that doesn't include the bowl game money that the schools keep to themselves.
Right.
So that's not included. I don't even know if that's released, but it's not included. So you're saying you're over $41 million per school, man. I'm baffled as to where that money goes. I'm baffled as to, these schools should be, if you just look at the locker rooms, I mean, the money goes there. The money goes to improving, campus, I hope. I mean, it goes to the absurd contracts that these coaches get paid. I go back to what you said before, that players should be paid, and they should be paid. I don't know how to do it. We can have a 3-hour podcast on how to do it, and we probably still wouldn't come up with the correct answer.
No, I agree with you 100%.
In comparison, the Pac-12 is getting $29 million per school, and the ACC is getting $27 million per school. So that just tells you something that I've been saying, for years now, is that the SEC is just a powerhouse conference. The media rights, everybody wants to have them on TV, but we can both agree that the only reason the SEC is as successful as it is because of Alabama. If they did not have Alabama in their conference,
much less desirable.
Yeah. So I would love to see. I would love to see the media rights. I'm sure there's somewhere on the internet I can find that. But even with the Big Ten with their own network, I know the SEC network is affiliated with ESPN, and that's all fun and games. But the Big Ten network has, the Big 12, they don't have a network yet. The Pac-12 has their own network, and they're still only getting $29 million a school. So that tells you, East Coast. SEC, man, it's a powerhouse, and I am baffled. It's amazing how much money college football brings in.
Yeah, it is. It tells you pretty much all you think that you need to know, and I think that pretty much ends that topic right there. Let's move on. Greg Schiano, Ohio State defensive coordinator, potentially being interviewed by the New England Patriots to fill their defensive coordinator position. Do not care what that means for the Patriots. What does that mean for Ohio State if he ends up taking the job for 2018?
I think it might be a plus. I think it might be addition by subtraction. I think Greg Schiano is a very overrated coordinator. If you look at the Ohio State stats from this past season, they ranked middle of the top 25 in a whole bunch of things. Their pass defense was pretty god-awful, at 183 a game. That ranks, I can actually sort it, and then actually ranks pretty low. I can't even find it because it's down so low. But, they just hired a guy from Washington State, Grimps, how you pronounce his last name. They just hired him to be a co-DC, so he'll probably move into that spot. And, Greg Schiano coached at Miami, so I kind of have a soft spot for Schiano. But when he left Rutgers to go to Tampa Bay, I think his mentality changed. I think when he was at Rutgers and he had, those couple of really good classes, and he was a big fish in a small pond at Rutgers. They didn't expect anything from that school. They didn't expect anything from him. And when he went on and he had a couple really good seasons, top 25, top 15, top 10, they thought, hey, he's a defensive mastermind. But then he went to Tampa Bay and you saw that his scheme didn't work in the NFL, and you said, okay, it didn't work in the NFL. Come back to college. Came back to college at Ohio State, and he has not shown what he did, not only at Rutgers, but what he, performed at Miami when he was down there, and I think he's a lot of hype and no substance, man.
No, I agree with you too. And if you look back on Ohio State's year, like statistics wise, okay, they finished 30th in pass defense. That's not really that bad when you take into consideration there's 130 teams or so. So okay,
but for Ohio State, I mean,
yeah. So
should be.
But the problem is, Drew, it's not necessarily so much the numbers as what you actually saw. They gave up big plays. Like, you just didn't have faith that it was a defense that was going to be able to get the job done. Yes, most of what we've harped on is the fact that there were a lot of offensive problems. JT Barrett, in my opinion, put the car in reverse, didn't look very sharp. And I would argue that he had better weapons this year than he did last year. Curtis Samuel was a good weapon in 2016, but I think as a whole the receivers were better and more seasoned. But it just still, like you said, it didn't feel right. It didn't look like an Ohio State team that you ultimately, if you're a fan of theirs, you wanted them to get in the playoffs because it's a bragging rights thing. I don't think you really wanted them to get into the playoffs because at the end of the day, you knew it wasn't going to be pretty. I didn't have confidence that Shiano was going to be able to do anything against a Clemson team or either SEC team, quite frankly.
They couldn't stop anybody. I mean, the Penn State game is a prime example of that. Their offense bailed them out. But I don't see it. I don't see all the hype around him. I thought, losing, Luke Fickell a couple years ago to go when he went to Cincinnati was a big loss. And then they replaced him with Greg Schiano, and everybody's like, oh my gosh, Greg Schiano's he's the savior. Man, it's just not there. The fit is way off. And if the Patriots want him, and if you're an Ohio State fan, I'd say good riddance.
Good riddance, yeah. I really don't. That's fine. I would caution Patriots fans to just be ready for what they're about to get, because I believe when he was with Tampa Bay, I believe they were a pretty awful defense. I don't remember. It was a couple years now. Everything blends together as it is, but yeah.
He was hired in January of 2012, and he was fired December of 2013. So that tells you how well he did at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah. About as well as Browns coaches typically do. 2 years.
Yeah, he went 7-9 and 4-12. So yeah, good job.
Well, that's still better than Hugh Jackson, but still.
That's true.
All right, that's a pretty tight podcast there. I think that we covered a lot of different things. It is a little frustrating on my end because I did like watching football. Now we've got to take quite a bit of a break here. We won't have anything. I think most teams don't do their spring games until the beginning of April.
Yeah, approximately. I think you'll see them start spring practice starts in a couple weeks for some teams. So right. You'll see some together, and maybe we can talk about some of that stuff.
We'll see some news, but we won't actually have actual visible, watchable football until the spring games. And even at that, we're still 4 to 5 months out before we're actually seeing games. A lot's going to happen. I think we're focusing, for those of you listening to us, we definitely want to focus much more of our content on the NFL draft coming up because, it's the last stop for college players. Plus, the season is just dead. This is like where there's not a ton of stuff. We're going to be picking at stuff to try to put together content, but for the most part, we're going to come back to you every week. Maybe bring you some good guests. We'll see. We got a couple tricks up our sleeves here. So anything you want to say to our audience before we sign off for the day?
Hey guys, I just really appreciate you guys coming along with us on this ride once again. Check us out at collegefootballpros.com, YouTube, iTunes, wherever you guys listen to your podcasts. Like that on Facebook at College Football Pros. Nick, I think we pretty much said it all. Thank you guys.
All right, well, that'll wrap it up for this week. Make sure, like Drew said, to check us out at collegefootballpros.com, and we will see you again next week.